welcome to this edition of Toby Haydock's Who's Round Revisited, but it's not so much revisited as unreleased. I recorded this interview with my old mucker, Gareth Berliner, actor and comedian, hence him being an old mucker. We've done many gigs together, who played the coachman in The Woman Who Lived, and I was waiting for an appropriate time to release it, and then the Who's Round releases had kind of ground to a halt, and also I started to be unsure about whether I should interview every chum of mine who popped up in Doctor Who, because it was happening quite regularly, and I didn't want to give myself a whole new lease of podcast interviewing life, because frankly it's exhausting and time-consuming and expensive, and I've sort of felt like I'd been there, done that. So this one with Gareth, although it's an excellent interview, has always rather remained on the shelf, because I think I knew that I would be podcasting about these episodes one day, and I could release the interview in tandem with that occurrence. And that occurrence has just occurred. So if you enjoyed the happy times and places for The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived, well, even if you didn't, here is an accompaniment, some extra Doctor Who deliciousness in the form of an interview with the actor and comedian Gareth Berliner, which was conducted in 2018. It was snowing and it's bitterly cold, but we're inside and we're in Manchester. And I'm unusually with a Who's Rounder who I've known for 15 years, I should think. So I'm going to ask him to tell me who he is and why I'm talking to him about Doctor Who.
Hello, I'm Gareth Berliner, and you, Toby, are talking to me about Doctor Who because I was in an episode called The Woman Who Lived, I think it was.
Yes, now it's always confusing, it's because there's The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived. So you were part two of the Maisie Williams double-hander. So how did that come about? You're the coachman.
Yes. It was really a stroke of good fortune. I'd only just got an acting agent. I'd ended up, through sort of quirk of fate, getting a part in Coronation Street, and I didn't have an agent at that part, so that got me an agent. And the first audition she actually sent me for was Doctor Who. I remember it specifically because it's probably the nicest audition I've had so far, because it was one girl in a room. I was a bit under the weather, so was she. It was April the 1st, which was my birthday. It turned out it was her birthday. So we were both in this audition on our birthdays, and she was just really nice. I read the part, and with all of these things you walk out and think, probably not, but I think she asked me to do it a different way a second time, and I always kind of take that as quite a good sign. Either you haven't hit it on the head, but they want you to hit it on the head so that hopefully someone looking at it might choose you. And I was the only person that was auditioning in that particular slot that I was aware of. I think I was the only person she was seeing that day. I have a feeling they were caught short and had to get their coachman pretty quick. And I just looked right. And I think I even told her I've got some false teeth, so I even told her I could take my teeth out because it was described as gap-toothed coachman, which I think I may have done for a shot. And forgot about it, as you do with all these things, and then just heard a little bit later and was over the moon.
Well, I think it was a different day. I haven't looked at my diary because the listener might not know this, because it's not one of my anecdotes, but you weren't there the day that I auditioned, and I auditioned not for the coachman, but for the guy in the coach, the posh lord who gets held up by the highwayman. Yes. So we could have been in Doctor Who together. So I wonder if they were looking for comedians. Why comedians? Because we're both comics.
Well, the interesting thing about that is Rufus Hound is in that episode. In a very lovely role where he pretty much gets to play a comedian in the 16th, 17th century or whatever. So it would have been lovely to have three of us.
I know Rufus too. Yeah. It's interesting.
So I don't know. I don't know if that was luck or fate or what. But shame we weren't in it together. But the guy in the coach was still a lovely guy. Just wasn't you.
He's a good actor. He's Australian, I think, isn't he? John Vose. I think he's.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. He's done some big finishes. So how was it on the night? Looked cold.
Yeah, it was really cold. It was freezing. But it was an amazing experience. We were in a forest in the middle of Wales, somewhere, outside Cardiff. It was great fun because I got picked up by the cabbie and had to not say I was going to shoot Doctor Who, but I'm fairly certain he kind of knew I was going to shoot Doctor. I mean, he was pretty much driving me to a set. Turned up as I was turning up. Rufus was pulling away in a van or something, so I saw him through the window of what he was travelling in, minibus or something. So we had a little wave to each other. That was it. I'd hoped that I might get to see him. Then got introduced to Peter. I'm only calling him Peter because it's your podcast. I would otherwise call him Peter Capaldi. But got introduced to Peter, who was lovely, and Maisie. And we had to wait. I think I was there from about 6 p.m. and we weren't shooting till midnight. They just wanted us there early. Really nice setup in the woods. Lovely crew. Director was Ed
Basiljet.
Yes, who was a really nice guy. I mean, it's going to sound a lot like I'm just saying people were really nice, but there's no people were really horrible. I mean, it was a really nice experience. What I do remember specifically about being outside at that late an hour, we were there from midnight till 6 a.m. And in the forest, obviously they don't own the forest, so they can't stop anyone that might want to come and have a look at Doctor Who being filmed from being there. They have bouncers at some level of security, but they can't really particularly do anything. And there was one guy who turns up apparently to nearly everything they shoot. I think he's a little bit autistic, a bit on the spectrum, very, very knowledgeable, and the catering, they fed him. And I just thought it was really sweet. And because they've seen him before, they just took care of him. And I just thought it was really nice that there was quite a positive attitude to him. Whereas there was a paparazzi who was also lurking around the forest with his camera, and they weren't so keen on him for obvious reasons. And in fact, I don't know if I can say this, so you could always edit this out, but Maisie does smoke, but I don't think she ever gets pictured smoking cigarettes because she's aware of young people and that she's a role model, so which I think is really cool. So she had an umbrella, even though it wasn't raining, which was merely a defence from the cameraman in order that he might not see that she was smoking. So we were just sat at the side while one of the nicest things, weirdest things as well, was Maisie and I sat, and again, I'm calling her Maisie, but she's Maisie Williams. Maisie and I were sat at the side while her stunt double was on horseback and my stunt double was on the coach, because whenever the horses were attached to the coach, I wasn't allowed to be on the coach.
Oh, really?
It's a health and safety thing, because I've got no control if the horses decide to bolt. I'm not trained to do anything about that. So whenever I'm on the coach, in the shots you see of me on the coach, there are no horses attached. When I'm going, whoa, I'm woeing nothing.
That's acting.
Yes.
My God.
Proper acting.
How funny. That surprises me then, because often these days, quite often you see people in stuff who aren't actors, do you know what I mean? Where they go, well, we need somebody to drive a coach, that it's only let's get a coach driver to do. So that's quite, you sort of lucked out that they actually
very
didn't
much.
cheat.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I had a few lines, so it might have been, that's why they still wanted an actor, but he was dressed up the same as me. So we had this elaborate, for a few takes, it was essentially an elaborate ventriloquist act with me and Maisie Williams throwing our voices while our stunt doubles in shot nodded their heads, because the highwayman, if you remember, had a band, you couldn't see her lips.
Yeah.
So she only had to move her head as Maisie spoke, and they could dub that over. And the coach driver, I think I'm just reacting initially when she's speaking to me. I do have lines, but they obviously cut away and cut back to me for the shots of the lines.
And actually, her character's dubbed anyway because she's pretending to
Yes.
be. So there's another level of dubbing.
Yeah,
on
she
top
has
of
a
that.
deep voice, like lowly highwayman.
Yeah.
It's quite but I really loved it more than anything because I got to shout at the Doctor. I thought that was quite rare for a character to actually get to tell him where to go or to shut up. Because I think I said to him, "Shut up, or you're going to get us all killed," or something. You're going to get us all killed if you don't shut your face, or something. But yeah, it was a great experience. And obviously, like I guess every other actor who now appears in Doctor Who, given Peter Capaldi's experience, I hold out hopes that in 20 or 30 years I get a job opportunity that I didn't expect.
Absolutely. And do you... what sort of reaction was there when the episode was broadcast? Do you get fan letters and things
Yes.
like that?
Now, that was the strangest thing, because Corrie, which I had already done, I got some fan mail over, and obviously it has a high fan base, and, it's just watched by a large amount of people. It's been going 60 years. Likewise, Doctor Who has been going how many years?
Well, we are now in 2018, so it's 55 years.
Right, so pretty close to Coronation Street as well. So 55 years for Doctor Who. I got the most extensive fan mail from the Doctor Who fans, which was amazing. I mean, it only lasted probably that first year that it was on, but I would get 2-page letters, 3-page letters. Now, I was a blink and you'll miss it moment in 5 minutes at the top, so there isn't an awful lot to say about my performance other than, you did a good job, well done. But people would somehow find a way to write perhaps a paragraph about the job I'd done, and then the rest of the letter would be telling me in detail about how the episode worked and how it fitted in with the canon in their eyes, and what they wanted to see more of or what they wanted to see less of. It was like their own review. It was like they had their moment by writing to me. But it was really nice. I replied to everyone with a signed photo, and I think if you Google me occasionally, there's a photo that comes up, because people also do a lot of, especially with things like Doctor Who, they do a lot of, there's a lot of autograph hunters out there who aren't the real McCoy, who will write to you for an autograph, flatter your ego, and then they put it on eBay. So there's a bit of that as well.
Yes, well, we might talk about that with the Corrie. Well, let's talk about Corrie, because it's came up, which is a connection. There's a few connections between us that will prop up during this conversation, I'm sure. So, but you had a good stint in Corrie, and you were saying you didn't have an agent when you got that. So how did that come about?
No, it was really amazing. I went for an open audition that came out, that was circulated, because I have a disability, but it's invisible. So this email went around that they were looking for a disabled character for Coronation Street that would be a regular character. And my wife, who's also an actress, Kirina, she spotted it, sent it to me, and she knew that I harboured ambitions to act. I had since I was a kid, before I ever had ideas of stand-up. So she sent it to me, and I read that the woman casting had cast Citizen Khan. So I mainly went to that audition to be seen as a comic doing an audition, that I might be, the lady might bear me in mind to cast me for Citizen Khan. So I went with no illusions of Corrie at all. I ran into Lawrence Clark while I was there, which was amazing. He's a friend of ours. I ran into a few people.
Also a massive Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, massive Doctor Who fan. So I ran into Lawrence, did the audition, forgot about it. Within a week, I normally just assume if I've heard nothing in a week, I haven't got the job, and I forget about it. So I forgot about the job, and then about a month and a half later, the phone rang, and someone said, "Hello, Gareth, it's Coronation Street here." And I think I said something along the lines of, "Fuck off, Tom." Because I thought it was my mate Tom. And they were like, no, it's Coronation Street. And I said, but I already kind of said to them, not that I was wanting to do myself out of a part, but I said, well, I didn't get the part, did I, though? And they said no, but the producers really liked you, and because it was quite a funny part that I'd auditioned for, and they said the producers really like you, they have a character in mind. He's going to come in for 2 episodes, he might do a bit more. I think that's really about whether you can act or not.
Yeah.
So he might do a bit more. Would you be interested? Which I love the idea that I might have gone, no, to be honest, I'm a bit busy at the moment. I can't be. I didn't want that part. So I said, yeah, of course. And they said they would call me back to discuss salary or money. I knew that, in all honesty, for a little break like that, I'd have done it for 50 quid. So I'm lucky that Kieran and my wife has a very good, well, we now have a very good agent. So I phoned her agent and said, I can give you a commission for 2 episodes of Coronation Street if you'll represent me. So I'm basically going to give you money if you will just be the person that represents me. She said yes, but initially she said yes, but only for that job. I'm not going, and I saw it as an amazing chance to get my foot in the door of acting, and then immediately was being told, no, I'll just take you for this job, which was obviously a worry. Yeah. But then it went really well at Corrie, and they called me back for more episodes, which obviously told her I was capable of doing a good job as an actor. And then I looked through her roster, and they all weirdly they looked like actors. Like everyone on her roster, obviously you're squeaky clean for your headshot. They all looked like chiseled or just they looked like actors. And I don't want to be nasty to myself, but I've got a rough face, which is why I was hired to play a rough character in Corrie and a rough coachman in Doctor Who or whatever. So I just wrote to her a note just saying, look, I don't think I'm a threat to you revenue-wise with your other actors. I think you can earn more money from me where they won't get any auditions for those parts. And because I think I'd been called back to Corrie, she said okay. So it was like a handshake deal. And then the first job she sent me for was Doctor Who, and I got it. So it was kind of really, really amazing fortune that I've ended up. And kind of, if I'm honest, because we were talking about sort of being fortuitous before, this is embarrassing. But from the time I was a little kid, when I was a young man, I always hoped one day I'd get discovered. I always hoped one day I'd get to act because I love film, I love telly. And so it's taken a long time for it to happen, and it's happened in a way without me really trying. It just kind of stumbled into it, and I'm really pleased I have, and I'm hoping, and my wife says to me that in a way I've come into it at the right point in my life, because I'm 45, and this is a particular point where if there's someone who's been acting since their teens and 20s, if they haven't got to where they want to get to by about 45, unless their hunger and passion for acting is huge, this is the point at which they may go, I'm going to get a job. Mm-hmm. And I've come into it with kind of passion and excitement late in my life, so I'm hoping that pays off for me.
Shows how furiously competitive it is, though, that you can even get a job on the biggest show on television and an agent's going, only this.
Yeah, that was a real surprise, because I thought I was a shoo-in. I thought, I'm giving you this job, and, obviously you'll take me on. But I think that's a credit to Caroline, my agent's. She's very professional, and she knew me through Kirina. She knew that I was a comic, which I think inherently, and I do believe this, that being a comedian gives you a lead in the ability to act. I'm not saying it makes you a good actor, but I think if you have the skills of a comic, you have the ability within you to act. It's whether or not you do that well when you're not playing yourself, an altered version of yourself. I was really lucky. I was really lucky that she took me on, and I'm very pleased. And now I just need to get some more parts. I've done a few bits, but I'm desperate for something else this year at the moment.
Well, you've done an episode of EastEnders as well.
Yes.
So how did the two soaps compare?
You want me to be honest?
Yeah.
EastEnders is pants and Corrie is brilliant. That's not even... Corrie's very much, and you would know because of Cheryl Lee, Corrie is very much a family... It feels like a family vibe. It's a very supportive cast. And all that... I found that this was my experience. I compared it to the green room. So there were some people when I got there that didn't really bother to give me much of the time of day, because it's like an open spot going into the green room amongst 3 top headliners. Some headliners might talk to you, but some won't bother because you might not be there in 6 months. So some people made less effort, not in a nasty way. They just, I'm just in their head, not an extra, but just a small part. The longer I came back, the more people start going, oh, okay, I can trust this guy a little bit because he's now becoming part of the family. So there's that really lovely familial vibe at Corrie. Plus, it's got advertising behind it. So, it's a free breakfast and it's catered, and there's, whereas EastEnders, I'm happy to be cast in something in EastEnders in future. I don't want you guys at EastEnders to think I'm being horrible, but by comparison, I was shooting at night, so it's got that going against it. It wasn't really... It just wasn't the green room. There wasn't the rooms for the actors to change in the same way. Like I was, my changing room was like a building site prefab build office with a lock on the door, so I could lock it. And I was given the combination. It had a nice couch in it and some central heating, but essentially I felt like I was at a car yard. And then we were shooting outside, and it was great fun, and especially fun for me because I'd just done Corrie, so it was like I couldn't believe I was getting, it's kind of a trifecta of Corrie, Doctor Who and EastEnders. But but it just wasn't the same. It just didn't. I mean, obviously, they didn't get the opportunity to make me part of their family because I was doing one episode. It was one night's filming. But I could feel immediately this is not in the same ballpark. There was no on-set catering. I was told if they don't get catering for night shoots, but if they do a night shoot, I think they get pizza. That's their treat if they're doing a night shoot. Whereas Corrie, I think, has more money behind it than EastEnders has financially. So you get looked after at Corrie, and at EastEnders you're a little, they have a Costa shop on site. Things like that. It's just a little bit different. It's like you don't get coffee. There's a Costa shop.
Buy your own.
Yeah.
Right. Gosh.
Yeah. It's literally that. That's the difference. Is like you're on your Todd and you got to buy your own stuff, and you might get some food. And in Corrie, you don't have to worry about that. We'll look after you.
I suppose because you're on the licence fee and it's a story waiting to have a look at these EastEnders actors drinking coffee that you're paying for.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. And what was lovely about EastEnders was I've never punched anyone in my life. And in EastEnders, I got to punch a character called Masood. And although it was a fake punch, his acting made me feel like I was Superman because he threw himself about 3 feet. It was awesome.
Oh, great. Yes, some context for that, ladies and gentlemen, was that we were both to gig last night, and there were some fisticuffs involved. But let's leave it there. But more context is that you mentioned talk about Coronation Street, and the regular listener might not know because it's not about me. Is that my other half is an actress who's been in Coronation Street for many years, and we've talked about. When the casting went out, it was for a disabled character, and it's interesting, isn't it, that my other half is a wheelchair user, that Coronation Street and ITV are sort of very proactive when it comes to representing disability on the screen. I would say more than some of the other television makers. So is that something that you've noticed, that you're now becoming sort of sought out, or do you think that was just a phase and now people will pat themselves on the back and they've done it?
It's hard to tell. Like, I feel like I don't know if the part that I went for, which was a regular, I think there was an actor who did it. I think he got cast. I'm not sure if his part happened because my part, Macca, was a completely new, different part. I think visual disability gets the opportunity where if ITV or whoever is trying to cast more positively, more openly, if you have a disability that can be seen by an audience, I think that is castable, and that is where they are representing disability on a better level. I think if you have an invisible disability, that doesn't necessarily mean there's any advantage to the possibility of casting, because telly is a visual medium. So when I went for that part, obviously they could have stuck me in a wheelchair, but I would have been cripping up, is what it's called, if I'd have sat in a wheelchair. And I think they didn't want anyone doing that. They didn't want that kind of backlash, so they were looking for a disabled person. So I think when I stepped in for that audition, they obviously liked me, which is really nice, but they obviously didn't want someone cripping up. And I had something that, unless I lifted my shirt, you wouldn't know anything was wrong with me. Unless I sat and talked about my medical history, you wouldn't know anything was wrong. So I do think the representation's getting better. I'd still like to see it being even better. Like, I would like a character to walk into a shop somewhere and the shopkeeper happens to be deaf or happens to be blind or happens to be sat in his chair behind the counter, because that's reality. But I do think ITV and certainly Corrie's trying to make an effort. It seems, they did... they had Deaf Awareness Week. We had a couple of characters in, I think, that were deaf. Some sign language going on. It may seem, I don't know, it may seem tokenistic because it only lasts kind of that week, but if it educates people, if it makes people interested in knowing more about either the support services involved for deaf people or for learning sign language, etc., I do think they're making more of an effort. And certainly, I can't remember the whole storyline, but I know Cheryl Lee's character had sort of medical marijuana storyline, which is fantastic, and something that the whole disabled community is dealing with and struggling with at points. It's good to see. I think it's getting better. And I suppose in a way it has afforded me some opportunities that I wouldn't have had. And certainly I think the National Film Theatre has started a database for National Theatre started a database for disabled actors, and I did a couple of monologues for that, so they can try and promote. And my wife, so we're both, our other halves are both actors, and my wife has dwarfism, and I think she's had more opportunities in the last few years than used to exist. I mean, she doesn't play any dwarf tropes kind of thing like elves or anything, and she's worked at the National and she's done telly, but I do think she's had more opportunities. I think it's really about all of not just telly, it's about theatre as well. It's basically about casting, recognising that different bodies exist, and there is no reason different bodies can't play different roles. And in fact, Kieran, in her latest, kind of one of the latest productions she's in was Jane Eyre, and it's the first time she's had an opportunity to play multiple roles. None of the characters were a little person, so to speak, and the audiences didn't bat an eyelid. It was real proof that if you just cast an actor who has the ability to act well, it really doesn't matter about their body, unless their body is necessary, unless their disability or body is necessary to the story in some way. But otherwise, an audience can see past that.
Well, it's interesting because I talked to Cheryl Lee about this a lot, because she's involved now in trying to get... I mean, she got a load of disabled performers in for some general choreo auditions and things like that. And she's very proactive. But I told her the story, and it's a Doctor Who one of Nabil Shaban, who played Syl in Doctor Who in the 80s.
Yeah, and I remember.
And that was the Doctor Who team thinking they were being great, because they said,
groundbreaking.
We've given but the head of drama at the BBC said, yeah, but you've cast him as an intergalactic slug, so in a way you're perpetuating the idea. But it was all with the good intentions, and I bet you Nabil Shaban would say, no, I'm delighted that I played such a part. But what the BBC guy had hoped when he'd sent out that edict saying we need more disabled performers was that you'd have what you said, a sort of a bank manager behind a desk. Now, you wouldn't know that actor was a wheelchair user, but you happen to have used a wheelchair using actor for a part that doesn't need to stand up. You know? And Cheryl Lee in Little Britain, actually, she was cast as a wheelchair user, but then she was in, I think, a Computer Says No sketch as a mother sitting on a chair with a kid. So she didn't move about, but she didn't have to either. Yeah. And it's those sorts of things that are perhaps, because as you say, you don't give anyone brownie points if people can't see that they've cast a disabled actor.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just think. It is really nice and progressive to see stuff, and certainly in the live medium, like I say, Kieran is at Bolton Optical, and they have a very diverse kind of mission ethos, and so in their casting, she's now doing Hamlet. She is one half of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and they're both women. I went to see their production of Scrooge, and Scrooge was a black actor, Mark, who's brilliant. He was great as Scrooge, and even more interesting, the two younger versions of him were white. And again, the audience there has been trained on, we just hire people that are good actors, and whether they are disabled, black, white, whatever, really doesn't matter to us. Can they tell the story? And I think that's the problem, and people get caught up, and I think Kieran has experienced it, I would imagine Cheryl Lee has. People get too caught up often in what does their body mean within the context of the story. Are people going to read their body having a meaning other than their character, and therefore we can't cast them because someone might think we've hired a small person because we're saying this person's weak, and it isn't about that. And clever casting people or progressive theatre makers realise now that it's just about having a good actor.
It's funny, I wrote a radio play recently and the main character's a wheelchair user just because it allowed us some things, and I was sort of writing from personal experience, and I went and gave a talk about it to some writing workshops in Yorkshire. The guy said what I didn't understand was the guy was in the wheelchair, but at the ending it didn't pay that off. There was no need for him to be in a wheelchair. And I went, well, no, it wasn't about the fact that he was... No, he wasn't going to get rescued or cured from it. He just happened to be... It allowed some story points to develop more, and it was about making a house accessible and building. But no, I hadn't made a wheelchair user so I could cure him, or so he could learn something. But it was interesting that he couldn't get his head around, well, why wasn't it just a normal person?
Oh, no, totally. Totally. And I think that's half the problem when anyone disabled is casting something, and that's what people are looking for, or they're expecting the person exactly to be cured at the end. And I think... There's also, I mean, and I struggle on the debate a little bit, but the whole cripping up issue where you take a major Hollywood actor, you give them the opportunity to crip up and play a famous disabled character. You know, I think it was in Tropic Thunder, but there's a high chance of being able to win an Oscar for that. And I think Eddie Redmayne did it for the Stephen Hawking story, and I understand that struggle in the debate of, I need to sell this movie, so I need an Eddie Redmayne, not Joe Bloggs who's in a wheelchair to play this part. At the same time, I think Joe Bloggs who's in a wheelchair, who's a great actor, can really play this part with humanity and understanding and a depth of knowledge that Eddie Redmayne's never going to have. So I find that interesting there.
Well, isn't that also something to do with the patronisation, if that's a word, of disability, and that it's terribly brave of a beautiful, able-bodied person to be seen on screen looking like that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. And I mean, it's got to the point now, it's really weird, where there are some movies that I'll choose not to see because of my political position on cripping up. And then at the same time, I feel like I can't really debate it if I haven't made an effort to go and see it. And the one that sticks in my mind particularly is a movie that came out with Emilia Clarke, is it? The woman from Game of Thrones?
Oh, is this the one
Me
about
Before
the first,
You?
Yeah, who decided to kill himself because he was a wheelchair
Because it
user.
was the most awful story to put out into Hollywood, and then for Hollywood to laud as like, what an amazing film and what a great actor the young lad was who played the part, because the essential message of the film was, well, if you're disabled, yeah, probably you probably want to kill yourself. And do you know what? We understand if you want to kill yourself. If you happen to be a millionaire as well, perhaps you could leave all of that money to the beautiful girl who helps you kill yourself.
Because you are better off dead.
Yes, yeah, and that's something that's an awful thing to promote, and gets a lot more press often, because that in the whole debate in the media, you know, the other big debate that's going on a lot now that we see, it is a really difficult argument and debate, is about the right to life and the right to choose your own death. And so you have people fighting to change the law here so that people can choose to terminate their lives, end their lives early, legally. So Liz, if you aren't aware of this, I would strongly suggest you go out and read something about it, and also if it ever comes to a town near you, go see it. She had done Assisted Suicide, the musical, she wrote. And I went to see that, and that was brilliant. And in order to do Assisted Suicide, the musical, I think it was called Assisted Suicide, in order to do that musical, she did research. She got an Arts Council grant, and she did research, and she went to Dignitas, and she went to Brussels to talk to the lawmakers there about right to die laws, and it was eye-opening for her. And what a lot of people don't realise is, like, Dignitas, how would you imagine Dignitas in your head? The building, the place.
Well, I sort of, I don't know, clean white walls and, you know, terribly civilised and minimalistic and...
Okay, so my version of it, in my head, was like some, you know, kind of a bit of a mansion, maybe quite well kept, quite like a private clinic.
Yeah.
It's literally a corrugated iron shed on an industrial estate with no ramps for accessibility. It doesn't have disabled access. You have to be carried in there. It's not a nice building. It's like a shed. But people have this idea in their head of it must be lovely, it must be clean and white and like a hospital. And Liz went there and just said it was really, you know, it was frightening. Because obviously she would never plan to do anything like that, but just to see it and realise it's not this beautiful place that you get to go to take control of your life and kill yourself. It's just a shack.
They should have done that as the ending for Me Before You. He decides he's going to kill himself, and he turns up and he can't get into the
Yeah, I will. I'll have to leave that now and make an effort to get on with my life. Yeah.
It's an inaccessible death bivouac.
Yeah.
All right, well, look, let's, before we wrap up, funnily enough, the other side of the argument, and it's one that I sometimes have with Sherry Lee, is we started watching Daredevil.
Yes.
I said, you'll like this, it's about a blind superhero.
Oh, yes.
And of course she got all stroppy and, you know, defensive. And she went, well, I bet the actor's not blind. And then, of course, there's this massive fight scene. And I went, that's why.
Because we couldn't find a blind man who was a trained martial arts expert.
Kung fu or whatever.
Yeah.
But what about, so as you said, the acting is a relatively late addition, but the performing is not, because you've been a stand-up comedian all this while. So was there any of that in your background? Tell us how you got there.
What, into stand-up?
Yeah.
Was all again a weird. I seem to have happy accidents career-wise. So my career had been checkered because of my disability and impairment. I had lost jobs when I'd got them. Full-time jobs, I lost 2 within 6 months each time, because I would get ill, because also I wasn't prepared to sacrifice having a social life outside of work, for work. So I would have both together, and it was like the only way I was going to have a career was if I gave up a social life and just worked and rested, and that's not who I am in my makeup. I went away on a holiday to Portugal with some mates. I fell in love with this has context. I went on holiday with some mates. I fell in love with a barmaid in a karaoke bar. She was lovely. An Englishman had left her with a baby, so it was never going to happen between me and her. But she really liked me, so she would ply me with alcohol every night, and I would sing in the karaoke bar. I don't have the world's best voice, but I loved having a crowd appreciate what I was doing. And I came home and I got it, and I'd been funny with my friends, the funny guy down the pub. And I started talking about I'm going to do stand-up. And in my life, I had a habit of talking about with lots of things. I'm going to do this. And that would last 2 years to excuse the fact that I wasn't working or I wasn't necessarily doing much. I went back to did a degree late, whatever, but I kept saying I'm going to do stand-up. And more or less, within the first 6 months of me talking about it, my best friend became friends with David Haddingham.
Oh, yeah.
Who's a comic. And Dave told me to write a set, and he would book me a gig. And I said, okay, give me 6 months to write my first 5 minutes, and then I'll do my gig. And Dave came to me about a week later and said, I've booked you in for Up the Creek. You're on next week, and if you die there, you will never die worse. But if you don't die, that'll be good too. And so a week later, I was doing my first gig, 5 minutes, at Up the Creek. Malcolm Hardy is a famous kind of alternative comedy scene promoter and comic who unfortunately is no longer with us, but was famous for kind of whatever you did, just saying that was shit, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I remember I came off stage and I'd got laughs. I hadn't died, but I hadn't stormed. I'd done all right. And I came off stage and he said, well, that was shit, wasn't it? But I never forget how high I felt from that moment. And I always remember I went and sat at the bar. There was a beautiful woman sat next to me. And she started talking to me. And I ordered a double scotch. She asked me if she could buy me a drink. I said, no, I'm all right. I told her it was my first gig. She couldn't believe it. I pretty much turned my back on a beautiful woman that was out my league when I was single, who was interested and offering to buy me a drink, because I was so high from comedy that it was unimportant. I had this adrenaline coursing through me. I felt fantastic about myself. And then after that, I was very fortunate because I started in London, and if you're an open spot in London, you literally can gig every night of the week, and you can double up every night of the week as a new act. So in terms of progress, your progress is much quicker than if you're a newer act kind of in a smaller satellite town. And that really helped me. And so I think from starting, it was about 2 years or maybe 3 before I went to Edinburgh with an hour. Having not even gone to Edinburgh with 15 minutes, just a friend of mine who knew I could talk for fucking hours said, Mickey D. Mickey D said to me, go and do Edinburgh, go and do an hour. And because I had a very particular story with my first show, which was a story about disability and my health, a suicide story, which I'd experienced in my first, that I put into my first show. It's a nice story, don't worry, and I'm still here, obviously. And that got me into stand-up. And I love it, and I do absolutely love it as a job. But I'm having some realisations in the last few years, which I'm going up to Edinburgh this year with a show. And it's my first time going up for years. And I'm going up principally not to win awards, not for amazing reviews. I'm going because the circuit has changed so much, which you're aware of. Yeah. From when I started, where, when my wife met me, I was gigging 6 to 7 nights a week. And now it's not quite like that anymore. And I'm going up to Edinburgh principally just to be seen by bookers who are new bookers, who don't know I exist on the circuit or wherever, or are based in different towns to me, to be seen. I'm literally going just to put my name back out there, do my show, do some other gigs, you know. But my attitude to it has changed. And I think when I started, I wanted to be the next Chris Rock or Bill Hicks, or, you know, want to be globally famous. And, you know, if you've experienced disability, health, struggles, your priorities change in life. So my priority is being happy, having food on the table, having a wife, a woman who loves me, and having that support, and being well. So my global domination plans have changed somewhat. You know, my domination plans are my house and the area in which I live. I'm quite happy to be dominant around there, but I don't need the world anymore. And so kind of stumbling into the acting, which was my original motivator when I was a kid, has been lovely. And now I'm just like, you know what? I don't need to be the master of my trade and the world's best stand-up, but nothing else. I would quite happily be a jack of all, and I enjoy doing all. And if I can work as an actor, and I can work as a stand-up, and I can work with my wife being her access worker, and I can do this and this and this, that makes me happy. But I'd rather carry on. I'd rather still be able to gig, and I'd still be able to act, but I don't need any more the fame or the riches. And even Corrie, I would love to go back there. I would love a permanent job there if they wanted to offer one, or if my character became, you know, in that position. But again, I've really learned some things, and like, I don't need fame. I don't need millions. I just need to, like, keep the wolf from the door, not have to worry so much, and that's all I'm after. You know, but I hope I hope my career in stand-up continues going well. It's sort of, you know, I've done all right, and I hope my acting carries on and goes well, and, you know, maybe something else will come along as well. But I'm very happy where I am now.
Oh, I like that optimistic note. Well, Gareth, I only have the two questions that I always leave to the end. The first is, nobody involved in this podcast gets paid, but we do like a charity to benefit. So in lieu of payment, we ask the listeners to donate to your charity, which is...
I would donate, actually, to the British Heart Foundation. That's what I'd like to do.
Okay, and I will do a link afterwards in my outro. And the final question, it's an awful one, but I've saddled everyone with it.
Dear.
What is your message to the Doctor Who fans out there?
Oh, wow. What is your message to the Doctor Who fans? What is your message to the Doctor Who fans? What do I tell them? What do I tell you? Tell you what, you write in and tell me what you want. No, what's my message to Doctor Who fans? Live long and prosper, but that would be insulting. Just keep watching the show. I tell you what, I'm as a Who. I'd like to think I'm a minor Whovian. I'm very, very excited. I don't know how you feel, Doctor Who fans, and I hope you're not negative about it. But I'm very excited to see Jodie as our new Doctor Who, and I'm excited to see the direction we're about to go in, because I think it's going to be thrilling. So my message to the Doctor Who fans is: don't have any hate. Be open in your hearts to a female Doctor Who. That's what I want.
And also, in light of what you said in your first anecdote, don't turn up to the night shoots expecting to get fed, because they can't do all of you.
Yeah.
It's just that guy.
Yeah.
Well, Gareth Berliner, thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks, Toby.
That was great. Cool. Thank you. Oh, that was 44. Good.
My thanks to Gareth Berliner, who was interviewed in February 2018 in Manchester, hence him looking forward to Jodie Whittaker, who, since that podcast was recorded, has been and gone tempus fugit. Gareth nominated the British Heart Foundation. You can find that at bhf.org.uk, and Gareth is on Instagram and Twitter at Gareth Berliner.